And welcome back to the Responsibly Armed Citizen Show. We have an awesome, unfortunate show for you today. But before we go much further, I'm one of your hosts, Frank Horvath. Joined with me in studio is our other host, Mr. Tim Kelly. Tim, how are you?
Fantabulous as always.
Fantabulous as always. All right, so today's show, wrong place shootings. Loaded. So earlier this morning, I was going through and I was, catching up on news, catching up on articles, things like that. And I came across this article where a pizza delivery guy he pulled into the wrong house, and the homeowner came out and sent some rounds his way. Right. And, I was like, wow, that's pretty wild. And then the more research I did, I just kept finding article after article after article where something similar has happened. Right. Somebody went to the wrong house. Somebody rocked on the wrong door. Somebody, went down a driveway. Right. And then the homeowner decided to send rounds their way. Right. To discharge a firearm in that direction. Man, then the more I read, and just the more of the media bias, the more of these professors and things like that, throwing in their ideas and sure. their commentary towards that, the more fired up I was getting. I was like, man, some of that is just absolutely wild. So before we get into any of that, before we really start diving into things, Tim, how you just came back from Girl and Gun, Colorado. Yep. Fill us in. How did that go?
That was such an awesome event, dude. Like every year, it's just like it just gets better and better and better. There's like 700 ladies there taking classes from, I want to say it was 60 or 70 instructors over the course of, it's over the course of 3 days, but they have like a week-long like leadership day. They get to fly around in a helicopter and shoot automatic guns out of a helicopter at targets up against the side of a mountain. It's just such an awesome time, man. It's really just an uplifting event. I look at it kind of like a recharge for me every year. Yeah. Every time that I get to go there, I'm like, oh my God, I'm so motivated. Get me to the range right now. I get so motivated.
So I think before we started the show, you're telling me that, TACON 2025. So what are the dates of that? And, do we know if that is, tickets are available yet?
So Tactical Conference for 2025 has not been released to the public yet.
Girl and Gun Conference.
You said Tactical Conference.
Oh, I'm sorry. Girl and a Gun Conference.
Just don't ever do that again. A Girl and a Gun Conference tickets are actually May 1st through the 4th, and that's for the classes and stuff, the main event. Early bird stuff will start, generally the week before that. Mm-hmm. Tickets should go on sale. If I'm not mistaken, they'll go on sale for everybody that's never been in September. I'm almost positive.
Yeah, no. So TACON actually, it did go out to the public, and it sold out. It sold out with like...
Oh, did it really?
Yeah, it sold out within like 24 hours or something.
I didn't know they released the tickets yet.
They released the tickets, and it was just instantly gone.
Oh,
yeah,
man.
No. So yeah, TACON's already gone. So yeah, slip of the tongue there. No, a Girl and a Gun Conference. Okay, so September for first timers. Definitely something to look at, man. And all you ladies, looking at firearm ownership, looking at just wanting to be part of a responsibly armed citizen group, a club. Right. Now, learn a little bit more about a Girl and Gun. A fantastic organization from everything that I've heard. My wife's looked into it. Tim, your wife runs the Girl and Gun chapter in Yadkinville, and I hear a lot of really good things. I've observed a lot of really good things. There's a fantastic online forum. I think their Facebook group, right, that has a lot of really good information tailored specifically for ladies, right? Primarily by ladies. Right. So fantastic information is out there. All right, so let's get into the meat of it. Wrong place shootings. Tim, when you hear wrong place shootings, what is your gut reaction? What are your immediate thoughts?
My immediate thoughts is wrong place, wrong time. So it's a timing issue. But obviously, in just the one that I looked up, it's definitely a place issue here. I didn't know this was really a thing.
Yeah,
I didn't know this was really a thing. And I'm kind of like you. I get to reading the media's side of things, and I'm like, oh my gosh. Yeah. just stop trying to help. Just stop trying to help. You're not helping.
One of and there's a bunch of these articles that are out there, right? And I was just going through and reading, article for article, just really trying to go through things. And one of the comments was from a UCLA law professor, Adam Winkler, and his quote. And again, this is coming from him. This is in this article. People are constantly told to be scared and to use guns to defend themselves. So we shouldn't be shocked when this happens. That right there alone, it has so much wrong with it, right? I mean, that's the kind of thing that just it makes me cringe.
But you know what? In all fairness, if we don't take it upon ourselves to become more professional and hold ourselves accountable for carrying firearms, getting the training and the necessary education needed,
right.
This is how how those types of people are going to portray us.
Right.
They're going to portray us as that uneducated and unprofessional person carrying a gun around that's just ready to whip it out because they're scared.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that we have talked about on previous shows. We do not carry firearms because we are scared.
Right.
And I think that is like the crux of it. It's another tool, right? We're prepared. We would like to think that we're prepared. We won't know until the moment arrives. God forbid it ever does. But at least we've taken the forethought and we've gotten rid of that novel stimuli in some aspects, right? Sure. As far as training and things of that nature, to help hopefully mitigate something happening before it even starts.
Right.
And definitely, I think we need to pull this all back, to North Carolina, where our local laws, and kind of look at it through that lens. But there's just a tremendous amount of information that's out there, and a lot of tragedy that's out there.
Right.
I was going through and I was looking at a lot of these different cases. And this is some of the earlier ones that I pulled up were from 1992, 1993. There was some cases there, but a lot of it were people who pulled into the wrong driveway. One really unfortunate case, it really got me stirred up because I could relate. Was a 6-year-old actually was injured, shot and injured because a basketball had rolled onto the wrong guy's yard, right? And this guy comes out and he said that he went and grabbed his firearm and started shooting at the people that were in his yard, retrieving a basketball that had rolled into the yard, right?
That was in North Carolina.
That was in North Carolina, yeah. And there's a couple parents that got injured, and this 6-year-old that had gotten injured, from this 24-year-old who just took it upon himself to defend his castle, right? And I think we really need to get into that. We need to get into the castle doctrine and
the misinterpretation
of that, stand your ground laws, right? Because that when you go through and you start reading a lot of these articles that the media is saying, they're saying, well, that's the problem. That the problem is the laws that we have, the stand your ground laws, because it makes it so, quote unquote, right? And it makes it so hard to prosecute these people who are negligently, and I would say, right, discharging their firearms at these people, I would say innocent people, in most cases, that and it's because of these stand your ground laws that they're much harder to prosecute. They're harder to say that they were in the wrong in these particular cases, and there's just so much meat there. There's just so much there that, again, on both sides, right? So, that stand your ground law is there to, help in our defense as responsibly armed citizens, right? It's a tool that says, hey, we, that burden of saying that, we're in fear for life, that burden of, trying to make sure that, we're in the right is covered for us, right? That we were, genuinely in fear for life. But, people are just taking it too far when they're negligently, shooting and negligently discharging their firearms at people who there's obviously no threat. So let's keep talking about this when we're back from break. Welcome back to Responsibly Armed Citizen Show, where we are talking about all things responsibly armed citizens should know. Wrong place shootings is the topic of today. Segment 1, we already got a little bit fired up, so we're going to just continue the fire. We're going to roll right on with it. One of the articles that I had pulled up, And this was just last month where Kevin Mohan was sentenced. I think it was 25 years. Yeah, 25 years to life, right? For discharging a firearm and fatally shooting a 20-year-old, right? And if you go through and you read the story, this was up in upstate New York that does not have a stand your ground law, by the way. So she was looking for a Halloween party, and with her and one of her friends, they turned down the wrong driveway, right? And she turned around. They realized that they were in the wrong driveway. They turned around in the driveway and they were leaving. And this person, right, this guy, Kevin, walked out, discharged 2 rounds at the vehicle as it was leaving. Both rounds struck the car, one fatally, injuring and killing the female that was in the car. And that right there is just, there's no reason for it. No. There was no threat. There was no reason why, he should have discharged a firearm in the first place. Let me tell you, where I live, I have a driveway that cuts across right in between two, one for Statesville, relatively busy road, to back into the neighborhood. And people are all the time using my driveway as a cut through. Yep. They just, rip right through. Now, it sucks for me because, I have young kids at the house. I'm constantly in fear that, I can't let them out to go play because somebody's going to rip through my driveway and, get back in the neighborhood. But is that enough for me to discharge a firearm at them? No, absolutely not. There's time and place. I mean, there has to be some sort of threat of violence, and there has to be motive and availability, motive and opportunity. There has to be some way of being able to dictate that you are in fact in fear for your life, and this person who is attacking you is actually there to do you harm. They're not just trespassing, right? They're not just to turn down the wrong street or knocked on the wrong house or whatever it may be. And if, like I said, you sit there and you go through and you start reading through this stuff, and there is example after example after example of people doing just that. Going to the wrong, knocking on the wrong door, right? There's other case that happened here in North Carolina where a teenager was going and picking up his younger brothers, and he knocked on the wrong door. Guy looked through, saw that there was this teenager who was, knocking on the door, took out a revolver and shot through the door, right? In that particular case, it wasn't fatal, but it was still to the point of there was no threat, right? And then, there's other things there, if that same incident, they were saying that it was, racially motivated, right? So all the politics and stuff starts getting involved in that. But, that teenager was not doing anything wrong. If you look at all the accounts on both sides of the story, right? One guy was saying that the teenager was trying to open the screen door, and the teenager was saying, no, that didn't happen, right? So there's conflicting stories there. But regardless, just that alone isn't enough to discharge a firearm, through a door at somebody.
Right.
Unless, right, there was some sort of physical threat, some sort of violence that hypothetically speaking, that teenager had the means and intent to be able to, get through that door, had communicated some sort, whatever it was, right? But there's got to be some other things that are there.
Right. And, I think a lot of this has to do with, well, obviously I said it a while ago, lack of training and education, number one, but, I've talked to a lot of people in our line of work. We talk to a lot of folks, and a lot of folks have, honestly, they have a little bit of ego invested in their firearm skills, education, or anything like that. They generally have a little bit of ego invested. So you'll run into a lot of folks who have a tendency to have it all figured out in their head.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, if this happens, this is what I'm going to do. This is exactly how it's going to play out. This is how I'm going to do it. And unfortunately, I think that some of them actually believe that.
Right.
And how many times do people suggest something like that? Well, what if somebody did this at my house or did this at my property or something like that? How many times does somebody say that to you, like in a concealed carry class, and it actually be justified?
Yeah. Every class, and it's never justified.
It's never justified. It's never justified. And I think one of the biggest hang-ups is a lot of people get, I don't know where they get this this misunderstanding that they can use a firearm to protect their property. Like, no, you cannot.
Right.
Well, I own cattle. I can, shoot somebody for shooting my cows.
Nope.
No, you cannot.
Not in North Carolina.
That's endangering my livelihood. Yeah, but not your life.
Right.
Right. And that is a big difference here. You cannot use. You can. There's just going to be some pretty serious consequences.
Yeah, lifelong consequences.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's where a lot of people get hung up. They get hung up on a lot of gun store banter. He said, she said stuff. And, well, my buddy's an attorney or my buddy's a police officer and he said I could do this, rather than going out and getting the education that they need themselves.
Right.
They make up this stuff in their head and then that's what they base their decisions off of.
Right. Yeah, and it's really unfortunate. Just like you said, in every concealed carry class I've ever taught, we always get those questions up. Well, what if this happens and then I'm going to do this, X, Y, Z, et cetera, because they have these plans. And you're absolutely right? There's some ego that's built into that. But, a lot of it, I don't necessarily believe that it's the individual's fault, right? I firmly believe that, at least a portion of it's a cultural thing, especially in like rural America. A lot of these, I heard that type of stuff is just passed down generation to generation, right? And you don't want to knock, my parents who told me something, or you don't want to knock, my brother-in-law or whatever it is, who's a law enforcement officer, et cetera. But there's truth. Right. And then there's, hearsay. And a lot of it is, hearsay, unfortunately. Yeah. And people just believe that. Or they take a very small piece, right? They take a very niche thing out of context, like castle doctrine, right? And they warp it to their own personal perception of what fits their narrative. And, it's the exact same thing that, a lot of media is doing. It's the exact same thing that, unfortunately, a lot of other firearms instructors, we'll call them, quote unquote, are also doing in the community. They're not, they'll go and they'll get their North Carolina concealed carry, instructor, certificate, right, saying that they can teach North Carolina concealed carry, and then that's all the information that they take moving forward. Right. So they don't do any further education. They don't actually fully understand the law themselves. But it's a quick payday, right? Yeah. They can go ahead and take, $100 or whatever it is from the student and go along their day and sit and talk about how awesome they are and look at a couple of things and, meet the bare minimum standards for North Carolina, but they could be teaching the students incorrectly. And that's unfortunate. Well,
let's take a look at the castle doctrine or stand your ground laws, and laws that are similar to that. And the trend that we're seeing in some of these wrong place shootings. These wrong place shootings are generally happening on somebody else's property, and the person that's using the firearm and their, I can't even use air quotes and say defense, but the person that's using the firearm and doing the killing is trying to justify it by suggesting something along the lines of, well, they were on my property. Right.
It's at that point, it's just trespass. The castle doctrine doesn't even apply.
And you cannot shoot somebody for trespassing. Is trespassing illegal? Yeah, absolutely. And actually in North Carolina, trespassing is taken very seriously.
Right.
And you can lose your gun rights for that, man. Like you can lose your concealed carry permit. You can lose all kinds of stuff and do some jail time, if you're caught trespassing. It's a pretty serious
charge. Especially if you're trespassing with a firearm.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and like I said, it's a pretty heavy offense, but it's not something that warrants the use of deadly force. Theft, that's another one.
Right.
Well, he's trying to steal my car. You can't shoot somebody for stealing your property.
Right.
You can't. Why would you?
Right.
Right. Really. Why? Think about it for a moment. Why would you? And, so many people make stuff up in their head. Well, if my kid was in the back seat, and you really want to be shooting at a car with your kid in the back seat.
Right. Like do you know what happens when you shoot in a car?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
There's so many different things to consider there. And, okay, so if somebody is trespassing on your property, you cannot shoot them for trespassing. If they're trespassing on your property and they made you in fear for your life and give you no other option, then you may. But you're not using deadly force because they're trespassing.
Right.
You're using deadly force because it's warranted.
Yeah, they have the means and intent to do harm to you, right?
Exactly.
Or to your loved ones. There's other circumstances that are there. Right. Something else that we hear all the time that goes right in tow with this is animals, right? So I have my pet Fluffy, who I care for, I love as my own child. But in the state of North Carolina, Fluffy's property. Yep. Fluffy is not a member of your family, regardless of how emotionally invested or financially invested you are with that animal. Somebody can absolutely harm that dog, and there's nothing that you can do about it. Yep. Unless, right, there are other circumstances that's involved in that, right? If they have a firearm, they shoot your dog, and then they turn the gun on you. I mean, that changes, right? That changes things. But just because somebody goes out and hurts that property, right, or damages that property, destroys that property, does not mean that you can use deadly force against them. Right. And people they conflate that with castle doctrine all the time. And it's unfortunate. Again, I really feel like that's one of those things that's just handed down. It's a misinterpretation of the law, and it's just handed down generationally, or it's hearsay, or they understand just a small piece of it, and they conflate the whole thing. And it's serious. I mean, you're absolutely going to be doing jail time if you're discharging a firearm to somebody who's not a threat. I mean, for any reason. And more often than not, just merely brandishing a firearm. Right. You're gonna have similar consequences. No, not similar. You're gonna have consequences. We'll say
it's borderline terrorism when you do that. I mean,
it really is. Yeah.
It's, whenever you're doing that to change somebody's mind about something, right? Whenever you're brandishing a firearm, you're doing it to either A, show off, or B, you're trying to intimidate, right? You're not really going to shoot them. You're just trying to intimidate. And well, that's part of the definition of terrorism.
Yeah. Okay. And again, it's extremely unfortunate. So we have been hammering on with this topic. I mean, there's so much to say about it. I think it's going to be really important to, dispel, and let's talk about, what can you do, right? As the responsible citizen, that this is, castle doctrine doesn't cover all things. What can you do to help get rid of some of that stigma? What can you do to educate yourself a little bit better? Let's talk when we come back from the break. No, this is 3.
Welcome back to the Responsibly Armed Citizen Show. My name is Tim Kelly, and with me I have Frank Horvath. We've been talking about everything regarding this responsibly armed citizen. In particular, we've been talking about wrong place shootings and the misinterpretation of castle doctrine and stand your ground laws and that type of thing. So before we left a while ago, we were talking about how we can prevent these types of things from happening and what we can do, what kind of measures we can put in place to get properly educated on the subject. And so what would you have in mind, Frank?
Seek training, seek authorities. There's just so much information that's out there where you can, do better. You can better arm yourself, with education, and then better arm yourself with skill sets. Really, as a responsible armed citizen, it is all of our responsibilities to go and learn more about our craft, to go and learn more about skill sets, go and, seek out things, places where we potentially have deficiencies, right? And I'm not just talking about running a gun, and I'm not talking about, doing stuff with a handgun necessarily. There are so many other skills that you will use far before you ever turn to using deadly force. Yep. Verbal judo. I can speak firsthand on this. That is such an effective tool. Learning how to, de-escalate, learning how to communicate effectively, learning how to say the right things and feign the right responses, in a particular incident when you need it, right? That's not something that you can very easily do on the fly. It's something that you have to practice. You have to do in a structured environment, and it's definitely something that you need to role play a little bit. And it's very difficult to do that inside the confines of your own home, of your own castle, right? You need to find a group. You need to find other individuals who are willing to, expose themselves a little bit, right? And play act, if you will, a little bit, and work through a lot of these hypothetical potential scenarios, right? The ultimate goal is to get get rid of that novel stimuli. Right. That first time when you hear that bad word that really gets you fired up shouldn't be when your life depends on it. Yeah. It should be in a training environment where it's safe and constructive, and you can be mad at the person later, but in the moment, right, then you can go ahead and let all those emotions, you can get rid of all those emotions, or you can understand what your emotional response is going to be, because it's different for everybody.
Yep.
Yeah, for sure. I was watching just last night. I was watching this dumb teenage. My teenage brothers were over at the house. They're watching this dumb magician show, right, where this magician comes on and he plays pranks on people and things like that. And it was really neat. Last night's show, he had there was these two brothers, and one brother wanted to play a prank on the other brother. The magician was helping the brother play the prank, and they had paused this little episode, and it said, hey, we just wanted to make an observation here. People normally have 3 different reactions, right? They flight, they fight, or they freeze. And this particular brother, in that instant, right, even though he had all this martial arts background and all this other kind of stuff, he froze. And it was just so interesting seeing that there's a novel stimuli. This is the first time this thing is happening to this brother, and his response, regardless of all of this training that he had as far as martial arts, was that he froze. He froze in that instant, because that was the first time that he had encountered anything like this. This was dumb TV show.
Sure.
But, it is so true about human nature that, you have to be exposed to this stuff so that you understand yourself better, right, so that you can make a more educated decision on how you're going to respond to certain things.
Right. Yeah. And, one of the best ways to do that is to get some training. And I'm going to go ahead and take this time to throw out a couple of plugs. So we have our concealed carry class coming up. Yep. On May 11th.
Yep.
May 11th. And we do have some availability. Yeah, next weekend. And we do have some availability left in that. So go get in that class. Excellent opportunity to understand the laws. And then a couple of weekends later, May 18th and 19th, there's 2 separate classes from Citizens Defense Research. Our friends from there, Chris Seipert, will be coming up teaching a couple of different classes. One is called Contextual Handgun for Home Defense. Perfect class for what we're talking about today. Then another one is Force on Force. Adaptive scenario training, exactly what you were just talking about a minute ago, right? Getting rid of some of that novelty, and so your brain says, oh, I recognize this. This is what I should do, right? An excellent class, and Chris is just an awesome instructor anyway. And then at the end of the month, Memorial Day weekend, Saturday, May 25th, Dan Brady is going to be teaching his civilian defender class for intermediate force options. That class is specifically for everything that you need without using a gun. Right. It's all the good stuff. And I'm hearing there might actually be some live agent training in there for a volunteer who wants to get sprayed in the face with live agent pepper spray.
Are you trying to say something to him, or you're over here looking deep in my eyes saying,
I'm saying you should do that.
You're going to be voluntold to do this, right?
I'm saying you should do that.
Yeah, this is going to be fun.
Yes.
So there is a possibility. I'm not going to say no, but there is a possibility where that might happen. So we will discuss pay later and all that. We'll try to figure that out.
That needs to happen. Oh, and I told my wife I'd throw this plug out there too. A Girl and a Gun trigger times. They're the ladies' range day. Only ladies will be out there on May 26th, Sunday, May 26th. So if you're interested, shoot us an email. It's rac@apacheNC.com. That's RAC@apacheNC.com, and we can send you whatever information you're looking for.
Yeah, and don't ever hesitate to give us a call. 336-422-6859. 336-422-6859. You'll talk to one of us. Yep. Feel free to always leave us a message or give us a call. We'll gladly talk with you about anything, or really feel free to ask us questions. We want to be a resource for our community. So if there's anything that we can do to help be a better resource community, I mean, that's what this is all about. That's the only reason why we're on the radio is, is something that we're absolutely passionate about, something that we care, very, very deeply about. We don't mind talking about it. We don't mind talking to, the public. So, we're nobody special. We just have this opportunity. We feel like sharing it. So, feel free, reach out to us any way that you want to. So getting back to it. So, like I said, training. That's what I would say is like, the biggest thing. So talking about training, I know what my answer is. I'm pretty sure I know what your answer is, Tim. But as far as, this training, scenario-based training, things like that, right? Because that's really what we're talking about. We're talking about, getting rid of that novice MBI. What is the one class that just really is like your aha scenario-based training type course that, really did something for you?
My first ever real exposure to contextual force-on-force training was the experiential learning lab with Craig Douglas.
Yeah.
And I think that was my biggest eye-opening experience where, I tell everybody, I'm not afraid to say it. I made a wrong call. Yeah. I made a wrong decision in that could have, at the very least haunted me for the rest of my days. If not, I, probably would have done some jail time because of an honest mistake.
Right.
And, that helped me realize just then how deep this stuff can go,
100%.
and how important it is to get rid of some of that novelty.
Right.
But the one thing that I'm forever grateful for is that I left knowing and understanding and didn't have to do any jail time. Yeah. And I don't have to live with, any bad mistake for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
The person that I made the mistake to, got up and hugged me afterwards and everything. And, we still talk about it, like that is the benefit of force on force.
Yeah.
It's a lot like our instructor enrichment program, and the mindset behind that is you want to have that ability to expose some of these weaknesses.
100%.
I don't say weaknesses, vulnerabilities.
Deficiencies, right?
Deficiencies,
There's something special about being able to come together with, another group of individuals, right, who can tell you earnestly and honestly where you potentially have some, vulnerabilities, some deficiencies, because they're doing the exact same thing to you, right? As an individual, it's two-way street there. And, the ability to be able to get together with a group of individuals and share that and discover things and work through things and talk about things honestly and talk about, those scenarios that you go through in your daily life, or go through those things that are just burning questions on your mind that you may not necessarily feel comfortable talking to your family, or maybe not necessarily feel comfortable talking to, your friends, things like that, because they may not be coming from the same point of view as you are, right? Because everyone's an individual. The experimental learning lab, absolutely fantastic. Definitely, I ended up going through it myself, and it was definitely interesting. How everything laid out and played out. Definitely showed some things that I could do better. It was reinforcing for me. I feel like, because I did make some good decisions, and those good decisions I learned through, the law, and I learned through, personal study, and I felt very confident after that.
Right.
But like I said, didn't do everything right. And there's definitely, room for growth there. Tell you what, the other one that really was an aha moment for me was Phil Groth's vehicle combatives course, or not combatives, vehicle defense course. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that course right there, his force on force section of that class, it did a lot for me.
Right.
So the first time I took that was up in Pennsylvania, and I realized just how unathletic I was. I learned very quickly that, man, Frank's got issues with two left feet. So I took that to heart. I took that earnestly. I went back and was able to review a lot of the videos and footage and stuff like that some of the other guys took of me, and picked it apart. And I had another really good friend who was real big with body mechanics, and he's a chiropractor, so I mean he could really help me diagnose a lot of some of the dumb things that I was doing. And it picked it apart. That right there has nothing to do with my ability to be able to run a handgun. Right. That has everything to do with my ability to be able to understand my body and, its place in space and movement. And, so, I mean, again, there's just so much that's out there. It's not, even though you're going and you're, taking a class on handguns or going and taking a class, to learn how to deal with a threat or something like that, doesn't mean that that is the focus. I mean, you're focused on bettering yourself, and you may surprise yourself on what you actually walk away with. Yeah. There's just so much meat to it.
Gun school isn't always about just going pew.
Right. 100%.
Like just punching holes in paper. It may be all that you're familiar with, but you don't know until you step foot into it. Right. Really, it's hard to explain.
Yeah. The other big piece is again just going through and learning something and being open and allowing some constructive criticisms to be built. Everyone likes the experience. Everyone likes shooting. Everyone likes the go fast running gun stuff. But it's the nuts and bolts training is where the growth really happens. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Responsible Armed Citizen Show, where we talk about everything a responsible armed citizen should know. We're continuing our conversation on the wrong place shootings. We talked about what the wrong place shootings are. Talked a little bit about Castle Doctrine and kind of how that's twisted up. Talked a little bit about going and seeking training, getting rid of that novel stimuli, and now is everyone's favorite segment. Right, this is what everyone joined on is listening for, our competency of the month. So Tim, new month. Right? New topic. What is this month's competency of the month?
Well, our competency of the month for the month of May is explain the benefits of scenario-based training.
Oh, would you look at that?
I want to start first. First off, I have this, I don't know, I get this little twitch in my eye every time I hear scenario-based training or reality-based training. Even though I use those terms sometimes, it's hard for me to hear because a lot of times it's overused and very much misunderstood, right? We're not talking about LARPing. We're not talking about,
getting up in full battle rattle and just going and playing.
Yeah, man. Or I always think of Instructor Earl. I wish we could play that video of Instructor Earl, where he gives you this scenario. You're in Walmart and you're in your swimming trunks and all you have is a pen, a lighter, and a hand grenade, and throws you into the scenario and you've got to do X, Y, or Z.
Yeah, check it out on YouTube. Instructor Earl, you'll get a good laugh.
It's hard. It's hard to invest yourself in quality training when stuff like this is actually really hard to find.
So I completely agree. And, I'll be completely honest. Before I started my training journey, I had found a group of guys, right, who were doing, I would call it experiences, right? Mm-hmm. It wasn't where they were doing a lot of this scenario-based stuff. You're getting up, you're dressing up and you're out, outfitting yourself or whatever it may be. And that was such a detriment to my training journey. Right. I had so many training scars. I had so many things that I thought was doing right, and I have video evidence that it was not. Unfortunately, especially the first time I started coming around Apache, I was that guy who did those things and had those things that particular way, and I didn't know any better, right? And I was imitating other people who were around me who didn't know any better either, apparently.
Right.
But the thing about scenario-based training is I think you have experiences and you have real training. Those experiences can be fun, right? You can going out and shooting at targets and LARPing and playing and stuff like that in a safe environment. Cool, great,
but call it what it is.
Call it what it is. 100%.
So what we're talking about here with the scenario-based training, we're talking about immersive training. This is about getting you involved in the student involved into some more contextual-based training,
right.
Like where you're interacting with somebody and having to make the decision of how do I navigate these social boundaries? How do I navigate using pepper spray if I need to? Everything's up to you. Like you're given a airsoft gun, or you're given a UTM gun, which is essentially like a little paintball pistol or something like that. You have protection gear on, stuff like that. You're not going to kill anybody by doing this, but you can actually make the decision to take somebody's life in this type of scenario. Hypothetically, yes. And where a lot of this stuff goes wrong is, and I'll keep calling people out in the way I always do. It's a law enforcement officer who spent years and years and years in law enforcement. And what they know is law enforcement interaction with civilians and law enforcement interaction with other law enforcement officers. And the scenarios that they orchestrate and create are not accurately they're not accurate or useful to the everyday armed citizen.
Right.
Now, that's just law enforcement. It's not just law enforcement, It's also military. Military dudes like myself who spent a lot of time in force-on-force training, they get out, and that's the way they try to orchestrate this, and it does not at all. It doesn't translate at all.
Right.
And so now I'm not saying all law enforcement or all military do that, but that's definitely something to look out for.
Yeah.
Like you have to be careful about who you're choosing. And we mentioned a while ago about Chris Seipert. Chris Seipert's, former, I'm pretty sure he was a Green Beret. Pretty sure.
That sounds right.
I'm almost positive he was. Very humble guy, awesome human being. And he knows his way around force on force for the everyday armed citizen. He does not, he doesn't run it like it's a military thing at all. It's not an army course at all.
One of the big things that really stick out to me, anytime that, I do, force on force training, or whenever I'm with a group of people who do force on force training, or, other instructors, whatever it may be, I am critical about the safety aspects and the safety procedures that you have to be when you're setting up a force on force type scenario. If the group, the training group, if the individual, the instructor does not have a locked down safety regimen, if they don't have a locked down vetting process to go through and verify that there are no sharps, no live firearms, anything like that, including the instructor, right, including themselves, then don't involve yourself. Just walk away.
Just leave.
Just leave. It's not worth your life, not worth your time. There are so many instances of people who, participate in training such as this, where, force and force scenario-based training, where everyone is good except for the one guy, right? Except for the instructor, except for the one guy who has the ego that's involved and says, oh, well, I'm never going to disarm. I'm always going to have this. And then negligence happens, and that is negligent. And then somebody ends up losing their life because of that. Do not play with this. It's not something that needs to be taken lightly. Everyone from the top to the very bottom, and everyone in between, everyone that's involved in it needs to have a very strict regimen, needs to have a very specific way of doing things. And the reason behind you're doing things in a very specific way is for safety. You're safe for yourself, safe for others.
Right. And that goes for any type of training, folks. Like anytime you ever take a class, if there's not some type of emergency protocol and it sounds like the instructor knows what he's talking about, if they don't have the right kind of gear, like a med kit and that type of thing out there available to deal with certain problems that might occur, if they don't have people who are trained in CPR or the use of an AED or something like that, and it's just, hey guys, let's go shoot. You should seriously reconsider where you're at
100%,
that point. Like, and I've walked away from classes.
I have too.
And it's okay. It's all right to do something like that. It's better to hurt somebody's feeling than either watch something, be a part of somebody else getting hurt, or you yourself getting hurt.
And that's the thing. I think a lot of people, especially in our area, don't want to hurt somebody else's feelings, or they want to assume that the other person knows best.
Right.
One of the quotes I've heard before on the line was, "All right, big boy rules. This is what we're going to, that right there, that is a huge red flag. It needs to be a proper safety procedure. It needs to be, a proper way of going about. And listen, guys, if listeners out there, if you don't know what that looks like, let us know. Yeah. We will gladly sit down. I mean, we're going to talk about it at some point very soon, but we'll talk about it and really break that down and say, hey, this is what a quality safety brief looks like. This is the content. This is the information. This is the type of training. You need to be able to ask your instructors, why are you qualified to be able to teach this content? Right. I mean, there's you need to be able to speak up and be an advocate for yourself, so that you are safe, and then the others around you are safe. Yeah. I wouldn't want to bring my family to somebody who wasn't squared away.
I swear, you mentioned big boy rules. That's one of the things that I cannot stand hearing that. But I swear, if you're taking a class that involves force on force or some type of you're going to be shooting each other with airsoft or something like that, and somebody mentions big boy rules, don't just leave, and then make sure that you call EMS and have them standing by, because it's going to happen.
Oh yeah.
It's going to happen whenever you're that negligent about it. It's going to happen. But guys, we're talking about all the negatives that could take place from scenario based training or force on force and that type of thing.
There's so much growth. There's so much better things.
But there's so many benefits to this. Right. If it's ran correctly by professionals, the benefits that you gain from this, I mean, it's like walking into a whole new world. Yeah. It's opening your eyes up to a whole new reality, because it doesn't just show you what could happen. It shows you how you're going to respond. Right. Like a real cut and dry, raw piece of how you are going to respond to certain scenarios.
It's an immediate, reaction to something, right? I remember the very first time I took a class where I was told to talk. I was told to speak, and it came out I mean, it was so bad. Yeah. It was so bad. And, since then I've been able to work on that. But, that was novel stimuli. That was the first time I was ever told to do something. It was the first time I was ever told to, yell at bad guy.
Give commands,
right?
Like
So, because of, and that was that novel stimuli. That's something that, I've had to overcome. It's not as easy as people make it think it is, right? So when you're in the moment, when your adrenaline's going, you're focused on, having good marksmanship, you're focused on all this other stuff, and then you're told to do something else that is a more important skill, honestly. I mean, I believe so. Right. As far as like de-escalation or whatever it may be. I mean, in that instant, at that time, I fell apart. Right. And, I was able to get something out, thank goodness, but, it's not always the case, right? Anytime you add a new skill, there's going to be a little bit of shift in the power, a little bit of shift in, you may, degrade a little bit of marksmanship as you're learning something new, but, at least that novel stimuli piece is not there anymore.
I think that's I was there when that happened, when you
you were.
when you were trying to make words come out and give command to a paper target that you were supposed to be shooting at after you gave the commands, and it was exactly the way you described it, a verbal train wreck.
It was garbage.
But what's so cool about that, now, because you brought this up a while ago, when you went through Craig's experiential learning lab, I also watched that one, and you had to use words and navigate your way through that too, with a gun out. And you were able to do all of that, because it was not new. Right. Your brain recognizes, I know what this was. I remember what this is like, and I know how to do this now. And so you do it.
Yeah, and again, there's so much benefit. I'll talk about this on Blue in the Face. There's so much benefit to learning how to communicate effectively. There's so much benefit to being able to say, the words that mean the things, the way that you need to, and with the intent that you need to, and you can't get past that. Right. All right, Tim, wrap it up. Final thoughts.
We're out of time. Come out and see us, ApacheNC.com or rack@ApacheNC.com. See you guys.
Have a great week.